16.5 pounds. For a professional athlete already operating at elite physical conditioning, that number is not a diet adjustment. That is a complete biological reconstruction. Sophie Cunningham did not tweak her body this offseason. She dismantled the only version of herself that had ever worked at the professional level and rebuilt it from scratch. She did this while rehabbing a torn ligament in her knee, and she did it while the entire basketball world was staring at someone else. Here is what you missed while the debate about Caitlin Clark's return dominated every sports broadcast and social media feed. Two of Clark's closest teammates were quietly executing the most calculated dual transformation in the modern history of women's basketball. Cunningham rebuilt herself physically, from the cellular level up. Lexie Hull built herself financially, constructing a private business empire using a strategy nobody has properly mapped. Both moves are connected, both moves are deliberate, and neither one exists without the most disruptive player to enter this league in a generation. Let's connect every dot. If this analysis is already hitting different, tap that like button right now. It tells us you want this level of investigation, and it keeps us digging into the stories the mainstream coverage keeps walking past. To understand how radical Cunningham's transformation actually is, you first need to understand who she was for the 6 years before it. Cunningham built her entire professional identity around one thing: physicality. She was the enforcer, the player who set bone-jarring screens, absorbed punishment in the paint, and made a physical statement every time a veteran attempted to rough up Indiana's rookie point guard. At 165 pounds, Cunningham carried the structural mass of a player built for contact. That frame was her brand. It was her job security. In a league that discards role players the instant they stop being useful, being the toughest player on the floor was Cunningham's competitive survival strategy. Then she watched the film from last season. She studied the numbers. And she reached a conclusion that required real professional courage to accept. The version of herself that had worked for 6 years no longer fit the system she was entering. Rather than wait for a coaching staff to reach that conclusion and replace her, she replaced herself first. She dropped from 165 pounds to 148.5. 16.5 pounds, intentionally, strategically gone. Now understand the full weight of that decision. Cunningham is currently rehabbing a torn medial collateral ligament. She is recovering from a severe knee injury while simultaneously preparing to operate inside the fastest, highest possession offense in the entire WNBA. The biomechanics here are unforgiving. In Caitlin Clark's system, wing players must explode in transition the instant a defensive rebound is secured. Clark's full-court outlet passes are historically accurate, but the window to receive them is measured in fractions of a second. You have to beat your defender down the floor. Every additional pound of body mass exponentially compounds the stress placed on a recovering knee joint during each high-speed deceleration and explosive direction change the offense demands on every single possession. Cunningham looked at that equation and made the only rational call available, stripped down to the leanest, most aerodynamic frame her body could sustain without sacrificing the strength she needs to compete physically. But this was never only about protecting her knee. Cunningham studied what happened to Aaliyah Boston at the start of last season. Boston entered the year slightly heavier than Clark's system required, still calibrated to the slower, more methodical game she had dominated before. The result was a brutal opening month, visibly gassed, struggling to match the relentless pace of her new point guard's tempo. It took weeks of in-season physical adaptation before Boston finally unlocked what she was capable of in the new system. Cunningham watched every minute of that process and decided she was not going to waste a single game on the same learning curve. She showed up to training camp already transformed, already running, already operating as a catch-and-shoot weapon who connected on 43% of her three-point attempts last season, now capable of reaching her spots faster than at any point in her career. When Clark releases a transition outlet, Cunningham intends to already be waiting in the corner. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Do you think new head coach Stephanie White will build the offense around Clark's speed, or will veteran politics slow everything down? This question matters more than most people realize, and we are about to explain exactly why. While Cunningham was physically reconstructing herself, Lexie Hull was doing something that almost no one in the sports media landscape has properly analyzed. Hull is launching a direct-to-consumer cosmetics brand called Fora, built specifically for high-performance athletes. On the surface, it reads like another athlete side project. Scratch beneath the surface and you find one of the most strategically sophisticated business moves in the history of WNBA role players. Here is the core mechanic. The single most expensive cost in any direct-to-consumer business is customer acquisition. Most brands burn through millions of dollars in digital advertising just to get a potential customer to look at their product for 3 seconds, and the vast majority of those brands never turn a profit. Hull does not have that problem. She already has the audience. Every time she steps onto the court alongside Caitlin Clark, millions of eyes are engaged. Every pregame tunnel walk, every post-game interview, every piece of social content. That is organic, high-engagement reach that a traditional brand would spend millions to replicate. Hull is converting her proximity to the most watched player in women's sports into a private business asset she owns completely, with no corporate sponsor above her and no middleman taking a cut. This is the Clark halo effect operating at its most sophisticated level. Clark generates the attention, the spotlight follows her everywhere, and the players standing in her orbit who understand the economics of that proximity are not waiting for the league to compensate them fairly. They are building independent revenue streams that capture the overflow directly. Before we continue, if this kind of financial and competitive intelligence has become your go-to lens for understanding what is really happening in this league, joining the channel as a member is the best way to make sure we can keep producing it. Now, here is the layer that could unravel everything. The Indiana Fever hired Stephanie White as head coach this offseason. White brings deep ties to the league's established veterans. And the credible concern among the people who closely study this roster is this: White could implement a traditional, veteran-heavy rotation, slower pace, more distributed touches, a system designed to keep the locker room politically comfortable rather than competitively optimal. On paper, that approach sounds like experienced coaching. In practice, it would be an act of competitive self-destruction. Last season, the data was unambiguous. Every time the previous coaching staff benched Hull in favor of slower, higher-usage veterans, the offense shut down, ball movement stopped, floor spacing collapsed. Clark was forced into contested isolation possessions that stripped away every dimension that makes her the most dangerous point guard in the sport. Every time Hull returned to the starting five alongside Clark and Cunningham, the system reactivated. Passing lanes reopened. The transition game accelerated. The mathematical impossibility of defending 3 floor spacers with a historic playmaker in the middle came back to life. The film is not debatable. The lineup combination that features Hull alongside Clark and Cunningham produces the best version of this team by a significant and measurable margin. Whether Stephanie White follows that data or defers to veteran roster politics is the single most important variable heading into this season. The WNBA is fracturing into 2 distinct groups right now, and the dividing line has nothing to do with talent. On one side are the players who looked at the Clark economy, understood precisely what it demanded, and rebuilt themselves to meet it. Cunningham stripped away a 6-year professional identity and re-emerged as a transition weapon calibrated for the fastest offense in the league. Hull locked down a defensive role that most players would consider thankless. Then used the visibility that role provides to construct a personal business empire worth more than any endorsement deal the league could hand her. These are not players who got fortunate. These are professionals who saw the trajectory of their sport before it arrived and did the unglamorous work of positioning themselves inside it. On the other side are the players still fighting the new reality, demanding the system bend around their preferences, expecting minutes based on seniority rather than efficiency data. Those players will be phased out, not because they lack skill, but because in a league evolving at this velocity, talent without adaptation is already a liability. Cunningham's bet is placed. Hull's business is being built. The Fever's real season has not started yet, and somewhere in that locker room, the most consequential decision nobody is loudly debating is whether a new head coach will trust the data or default to the politics. That answer will define the entire ceiling of this franchise. Subscribe and hit the notification bell now if you want to be ahead of every development before Indiana tips off. Our next breakdown goes deep on the specific roster decisions that will determine whether this team contends or collapses. And the analysis is going to challenge everything you think you know about how this front office operates.